Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Red Room. Today, we're going to talk about Call of Cthulhu and how you can use it to play Wretched Epoch, or should I say, how you can use Wretched Epoch to play a Cthulhu adventure.
So if you joined here because you saw the mention to Call of Cthulhu, this is obviously you know what Call of Cthulhu is, but you might not know what Wretched is. Wretched is an OSR game. This is the core book, but this is just the rules. This is not what is supposed to be what you use to play Call of Cthulhu.
It should be this one.
Yes.
Oh, twins.
Wretched Epoch. So, what is Wretched Epoch? Wretched Epoch is a 19th century, late 19th century campaign setting, set in Paris. That's why it's called Epoch. It's
during the Belle Epoque.
Yes,
For those that don't know their history, this is the period.
Between
it's a long period, right?
Yeah, it's a large chunk of time. Between 1875 and 1914, so around that time. So this is called Wretched Epoch because the game is called Wretched, and the epoch comes from Belle Epoque. It's set in Paris in the 19th century. This is not actually a Lovecraftian game, though it's there are several inspirations, and H.P. Lovecraft is one of them.
Obviously.
And another one of the major inspirations is Adèle Blanc-Sec, the French comics from the 70s. There's also a movie. And Adèle Blanc-Sec itself is a slightly Lovecraftian.
It has very well. There's Lovecraftian elements in the stories. Not all of them, but
yeah.
Some. I would say almost most. Some of them are very, very Lovecraftians.
You won't find him here or in Adèle Blanc-Sec, but there are other things. I would say that the creatures that are not elder gods or any other of the other very powerful Lovecraftian beings are the ones that are more likely to appear here. So I would say that Amigo or Colorado Space or something else that's
and the cultists.
And the cultists, of course. That's so. Let's talk a little bit about Wretched Epoch. So what we have here, it's an investigative horror game. It includes there's magic here in this game. It's ritual magic. It's included in this one. There are also psychic powers, mesmerism, and all this can be used in a game. So you can play a conjurer, you can play a mesmerist or a psychic, and you can play a common person, an investigator, an adventurer,
a scientist,
yes,
a journalist,
yes, all kinds of characters.
An academic. Well, actually, those typical investigator types of Call of Cthulhu go very well in Epoch.
Yes, that's true. You can call them investigators, even though that's not the common thing here. Here we have another kind of trope. You play wretched characters. That's why the game is called Wretched. So what does that mean? That means that the characters are inclined to be anti-heroes and not heroes. That's not mandatory. We have, with time, that's turned out to be something that you can try to overcome and not use if you don't want to, among other reasons, because if you want to play this and not have this, it's also possible. What we have here is a setting information, and additional rules. But this is an OSR game, so you don't have to have our base rules. You can use something else. You can use, for example, the most popular Lamentations of Flame Priestess is almost compatible with this one, and you can use other games. You can use, for example, one that is, even though it's not a 19th century game, but it would mix very well with this one. The RPG Pundits Invisible College has the same kind of themes, so you could use this one as a Wretched Epoch as a setting, a 19th century setting for that game, and you can use several other games that are OSR.
Well,
That's it.
I see, at the same time, I see Red Epoch as a setting almost. Not say that is almost system agnostic, but well, almost, because you have 300 pages here, over 300 pages, and they are mostly of setting and story. So you can just
Yes,
use this with Call of Cthulhu,
or Call of Cthulhu. In that case,
even.
you'll have to use your monsters and
Yes,
pets.
exactly. That
So that's
is
just
that would be the problem, the monsters. But I think
yeah.
that's a question that I already know the answer, but I'm going to ask it to you. Let's imagine that is someone new to the video. Why Epoch and why this setting? Why this time and why is it unique? And how well does it matches with Lovecraftian themes?
Okay, so why the time? Even though there are many things set in the 19th century, namely the late 19th century, actually this precise the ending and the ending of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, there aren't that many books. There's one game, a Lovecraftian game, called Riders of Riley, which is the same period, but it is more of a American British, so English language, and this one is in not mandatorily set in France, but it's supposed to be. If you are going to play Wretched Epoch, you probably are going to start with characters that live in Paris, even if they aren't French.
Well, this is a part of what makes it interesting to me. That yes, and
Yeah.
while we were doing research for the setting, we actually discovered, well, we already knew more or less what they were there, but there's a lot of interesting facts about France and Paris in this time period.
Yes, and most of it has nothing to do with horror or investigative horror, even, but it's all usable. Things like the Apache underworld, which is the criminal gangs in Paris at the time. So you can think of it as gangs of New York, but in Paris. Then there's the whole story around the Dreyfus affair.
In the political crisis at the time.
The political crisis, yes, a very profound crisis that affected not just France, but all other countries as well, but very, very disturbing times. And of course, this is the time for secret societies and experiments, weird experiments.
It's the golden age of weird science, I would say.
Yes, weird science. So you can set your things like Frankenstein, but at the same time, there's Dracula and Sherlock Holmes, and even before that, Chevalier Auguste Dupin, which is French, so it connects even better with this.
And the thief, Arsène Lupin, it's from the same.
Yeah. So
and
all
Fantomas.
And Fantoma, yes, all those are in our references. Also, because if you are supposed to play an anti-hero, Fantoma and Arsène Lupin are obviously anti-heroes, so they are very adequate for this. You have a list of several characters here in Wretched Epoch who are major villains. So even though we are talking about characters that aren't heroes, but they aren't supposed to be the villains as well. So you have here a list of villains and a list of cults and secret societies, which can be or can represent the villains in your game, and some specific secret societies that are from the Wretched verse, because this is just a part of the Wretched verse. There are games set, or in this case, campaign settings in several times and places.
But again, I'm going to say what also makes it used as horror, because we're talking about always an historical setting. Yes, it is, but
not quite
horror, exactly. That goes into the realm of horror and the pulpish weird science fiction of the time.
So yeah, so there's the history here. You have a timeline and some details. Not a lot of historic information, because that's the kind of thing that you can find elsewhere easily. Wikipedia, for example, but smaller details about crime and criminology and
That
weird
basically
science and all that.
criminology was born, or started to be born on this period, and
Yes,
France had an important role in it.
yeah, with the Bertillonnage, the what was called the first steps into, well, not probably not the first ones, but the first scientifically based.
Approach to
Yeah,
criminology.
and there's not much information about generic stuff, that's just resumed in the timeline. But then there are several plot hooks that are based in history and small details, and obviously as well a description of Paris at the time. Not all of it is historically accurate, because there's a connection to the setting there. So we'll have information that is historically accurate and information that is setting specific, and that's what you can. That's why you can use it for a game. This game has insanity and all that kind of thing. We work with something that usually isn't in OSR games, perks and drawbacks. So you gain drawbacks, mental drawbacks, when you are confronted with fear and you fail the roll. So there's no sanity score, but there's a possibility of going insane before contacting with paranormal, supernatural, using magic, or even psychic powers.
That, I guess, that's a bit part of the most Cthulhu or Lovecraftian aspect of the setting, and is my favorite part about Lovecraft. It's not really the big, at least for me, the Cthulhu and the scary monsters, but that idea of people just going crazy because they are reading books and investigating, and the idea that magic or ancient forbidden knowledge will drive you insane. That's always was one of my favorite themes in Lovecraft.
Yeah, myself the same. So that all of that is possible in here, and you also have some description of Mighty creatures. Even though if you are coming from Call of Cthulhu, you don't really need that. That's just a small detail that you can incorporate in Wretched Epoch. This book here includes a scenario, one that's really an interesting scenario, and then many plot hooks that can be turned into adventures very easily, and the use of a tarot for plot hooks. So you draw a card and there's a plot hook coming from there, and several tables, because this is, as we mentioned before, this is an OSR game, so tables of random encounters and all those things are as usual. There's a chapter for game mastering that includes information about the time and the atmosphere and the factions. And even though it's set in Paris, there's also a chapter about the rest of the world. And not the whole world, of course, but there are several countries here, and each country has a small description of the country at the time, and then a plot hook that it can use for the country. So there are several countries, like not necessarily the largest and most important, but the ones that could have
connections with
interesting adventures,
and some connections with Paris. Though I'll say that maybe at the time Paris was almost the center of the world, or one of the centers of the world in culture.
They were dividing it with
yes,
England.
I know they were dividing it with England, but there were like the interesting places where things happened.
And we also have adventures, and
yes, let's talk a bit about the adventures. Well, the adventures are two of the adventures that we have were written by me, and they actually do have a bit more of Cthulhic inspiration. So first we have Insanatorium, that takes place in some thermal baths. the idea was that well, the thermal bath culture was very strong in the during this period, so I got the idea of people being isolated in a sanatorium or a thermal bath and just disconnecting from the world and maybe getting insane. So obviously there are cultists at work there. There are some ancient waters below the sanatorium, and the cults that want to bring Azathoth into the world. Am I pronouncing it correctly? Me and the Cthulhu
I think
myths.
so.
So this one, yes, it's very Lovecraftian inspired. Do you want to say something about it? Well, we played it as a
Yes.
player,
No, no, not really. Just
but this one is very strong. On when I started writing an
yeah,
adventure for
that
Epoch,
one
it went
definitely.
into.
That one is Lovecraftian,
And
without
this one is
doubt.
also a bit, well, different. This is the Bastard King. It's an obvious homage to the King in Yellow. So the idea here is a play that is driving people insane. This takes place in Paris, and it's a play, a cursed play that is driving people insane because every time it is on stage, it summons the Bastard King. So this is also, it's a different environment completely, but it's also very Lovecraftian inspired,
Yeah,
obviously.
well, there's a game, a role-playing game called
Yes,
King in Yellow, which probably has I never played it, but probably has some connections and some inspirations that are the same as Wretched Epoch. And the third scenario,
yes. This one, it was the Tears of Belphegor. Now I wasn't the one that wrote this one, or no,
no,
you. So
that was
I haven't read it yet because I'm hoping that I get surprised when we get to play it.
yeah. So Tears of Belphegor, I can't say much because I can't tell her, but there are no Lovecraftian references, but it is a very
It's a nice cover, I will say.
yes,
Yes.
it's very adaptable to a Call of Cthulhu kind of setting, and well, it's an investigative horror, so an investigative
It has the
horror story.
plus, the writer is French.
Yeah, so
So
it's
it has
written by an actual French person, so it's you have a kind of a different kind of perspective, and he also read this. Played it, of course. So it is approved by by a French horror gamer,
you
which
should put
is
that
something
in
like
the we should put that in the back cover.
yes, I liked it very much. He was one of the first persons that read the book, and he approved it. So I was happy because not just because he's French, but because he's a horror gamer and game master with lots of experience. It's probably as much or more than I do. So approved by someone with experience is always good. So that's it. Wretched Epoch is a different kind of approach to a thematic that appears in role-playing games often, but there's a slightly different. Not just the time, but also the fact that it's a Wretched game. The fact that it's meant to be, even if you don't play it really as a Wretched game, or I mean, if you don't play the characters as anti-heroes, it's still
the world should be
yeah,
wretched around them. It's a
the
dirty,
world is
wretched world.
darker, and yes, so this takes place in Paris, and of course it's a Belle Epoque, but the Belle Epoque has a downside. And if you see, for example, let's name an example, the TV show 1900 Paris Police. The full English name is 1900 Paris Police. If you watch that, you'll see that the downside of the lower classes and the underworld at the time was pretty wretched. So
that's one of the fascinating things that I think we discovered while we were doing was all the story about the Apaches and the fact that there was a gang culture in Paris that was very punk.
Yeah, that's true, and even the higher classes should heroin stuff like that. So that's a wretched time, and even as I was saying, even if you don't want to play the characters as anti-heroes, I recommend that you play in a wretched mode, which means put there the themes, the drugs and the violence and the crime and the political turmoil and the social turmoil of the time. Watch some of those things as inspiration. Arsène Lupin, something about it. Even though Arsène Lupin is a little bit later, but that's not really a problem. That TV show we mentioned, Polanski v. Jacques, is that?
Yes, Jacques. I would say, well, Adele Bansek, maybe not, because the film is too
no, the film
light.
is very light, yes, but the cartoons or comics, if you can find them, they are also very evocative. Perhaps Umberto Eco as well.
Yes, the Prague, especially the Prague Cemetery.
Prague Cemetery, yeah, that one is also a reference for Wretched Epoch. As we mentioned before, Poe's Auguste Dupin stories. There are 3, I think. Anything you can find about the Dreyfus affair, because that's a very, very important thing at the time. Maybe pulp can be adapted, and
I'm thinking even Jules Verne in
yes,
with all the weird fiction angle.
Yeah, there are supposed to be mad scientists. Mad scientists and the supernatural can be combined very easily. Other authors can be also picked up as a reference, like as it was already mentioned. Sherlock Holmes isn't exactly the thing, but you can grab it and go with it. So and obviously real stories of the time. I would say that's probably the best thing. Real stories of the time. If you can find it, something that I didn't read it because I couldn't find the whole thing, but I found many covers for magazines, crime magazines of the time, that can give you an idea of how things were and the kind of crimes that were happening. So that's Le Petit Journal.
Yes, and also that part of the illustrations in the book, there are some that are covers from the illustrations from the Petit Journal and from the Time.
There's another one, I think is L'Oeil de la Police, and there's a third one. I can't remember the other one, but they are kind of what can I call them? Tabloids of the time.
I think so. I would say.
Yeah. So there were several magazines about crimes that were real, kind of. Some of them were very exaggerated, yeah, but they were real, and the Apaches were the figures of the time. So that's you can find that and use it as an inspiration, even if you can't read the content. There are some places online where you can find, if you can read French.
Yeah, but even the images, I think they are.
Yes, they are evocative. Those covers have titles and some information, and even that's a plot hook there. You can see the image and the titles, and that's already a plot hook for an adventure. So I think this is enough as a preliminary information about
our suggestion on how playing Wretched Epoch with Cthulhu inspiration.
In the description you can find links for our sites, and in our site you can find also information about this, synopsis, and a quick start for the first edition of the game. Not the second, but you can find the first. And the first one has some information that the game didn't change that much. The rules changed, but not the setting itself. So if you are curious about it, visit our site, and you can also find other videos where we talked about the game and the scenarios.
I think there's even someone which showed part of the book. I don't remember if we did it for the second edition,
probably.
but I'm sure we did it for the first.
I don't think we have any game sessions recorded, but
no.
Sooner or later that will happen.
Yes.
Yeah. We are playing all of the time now, and we are uploading them. Okay, thanks for watching, and bye-bye.
Bye.